Assalamualaikum and hi everyone. Okay, so we are going to cover the next topic for this subject, which is on theory of production. So previously we have covered on the theory of consumer behavior, which we focused on how a consumer behaves in a certain economy in a way that they have to make decision on which products to buy or how many products they need to buy in order to maximize their satisfaction. So that is on consumer, okay, in the economy. So in this topic we are going to focus on how a producer should behave in an economy, or what kind of decisions that producers have to make in a certain economy. So now you have to imagine yourself as a producer. Okay, so it involves a little bit of calculation in which you are going to calculate the total production, the average production, and the marginal production that is in the short run. Okay, and then for the long run, okay, the production in the long run, okay, you are going to look at what we call as isoquant curve, and we are going to look at how a producer can maximize their production with a certain level of input. Meaning, as a producer, you want to know how much inputs you need to use in your production so that you can produce a maximum number of a certain product. Okay, so this topic we are going to divide the production. The first one is in the short run and the second one is in the long run. Okay, so there are a little bit of differences between short run and long run. Okay, so now first we look at what do we mean by production first. Okay, so production is a process of using the factors of production to produce goods and services. Okay, so we have the term factors of production here. Factors of production. Factors of production is actually the resources or the input that you are going to use in your production. Okay, so you are going to transform this input into finished products. Okay, so you are going to use all your factors of production, all your resources to produce a finished product or consumer products. Okay, finished products mean products that can be used by the consumers. So input refers to the factors of production. Okay, this is what I said just now, that a firm use in the production process. So you will process all the raw materials, all the inputs, and what you will get is the output, okay, which is the finished product ataupun the end product that the consumer can buy and use, okay, immediately. Okay, so these are the examples of factors of production, okay, that are used that the producers will use in their production. So the first component is land. Okay, so the first factors of production is land. Okay, land, okay, which represent, okay, the natural resources that a producer can use in their production. Okay, for example, water, air, or minerals, or forest, and so on. So these are all natural resources that can be used to produce a certain product and obtain the finished output. Okay, and it can also involve buildings, not necessarily natural resources. So buildings are also an element of land in a production. So if you rent a land together with a building, so that is considered as the first factors of production that you are going to use. Okay, and then the second one is labor. Labor is also an important element in your production. In order for you to create or to process a certain product, you need a certain number of labor. So that will require physical and mental abilities, okay, of a human. Alright, and then the third one is capital. Okay, so capital is actually coming from investment. Okay, so investment is also an important element in a production. Okay, in order for you to obtain fund for your production, okay, to fund your production, you need capital. You need a certain amount of money to start a production. So investment is important, okay, because investment will contribute, okay, to your capital. Alright, and then we have entrepreneur. Okay, entrepreneur is actually the people who come up with the idea of the production. Okay, so this will come up with the idea or the innovation, and this is also the person that will run the idea. Okay, so in order for a production to happen, you need an entrepreneur first. Okay, so this is also a main element. Okay, so this entrepreneur will combine all the inputs, all the factors of production, all the resources, so that the production can run. Okay, so and this is also the person who bears the risk from the production, risk of losses and so on. Okay, so these are 4 important factors of production, okay, in order to go through a process of production. Okay, so these are the resources. Okay, what do we mean by a production function? It shows the relationship between input and output in a production. So you have your Q equals to the factor of capital, K is capital, L is labor, M is raw material. So this actually shows how much how much output you can produce, okay, with the available factors of production ataupun with the available inputs. Okay, so let's say if you have 3 labor and 4 machineries, for example, so how much of output you can produce from that use of input. Okay, so this is what we call as a production function. It shows how much output you can produce with a certain number of inputs. Okay, so now, okay, we are going to divide our production into 2. The first one is in the short run, which is in a short time of period, and then in the long run. Okay, so what are the differences between short run and long run? The main one is in terms of the input that is going to be used in the production in the short run as well as in the long run. So now we are going to look at the input first. Okay, so we have here fixed input and also variable input. Okay, fixed input is actually the input in your production that is not affected by the quantity of your output, meaning regardless of the amount of your production, whether you produce more or you produce less, the fixed input will remain the same. Okay, so examples of fixed input are machinery. Okay, if you produce 1,000 unit of your product, 2,000, 10,000, or none, or zero number of production, you still will have the same number of machinery, okay, in your production. And then land and buildings. If you have one building, okay, you can produce 5, you can produce 1,000, you can produce 100,000 of production. Okay, so the number of building will remain the same. So that is what we mean by fixed input. It is not affected by the change in the output. Okay, so that is fixed input. Okay, and then we have variable input, okay, which will change when the output change. Okay, it will change according to the amount of output. So usually the more output you produce, the more variable input you will need in your production. For example, if you want to produce more of a certain product, you need more of the raw materials. Okay, let's say if you want to produce t-shirt, you need more fabric. Okay, if you want to produce more t-shirt, you are going to use a lot more electricity in your production. Okay, and then we have fuel. Okay, the transportation cost, for example, and labor is also included in as a variable input, because if you want to produce more, you might need a higher number of labor or workers. Okay, so the more you produce, the more workers you need in your production. So labor is also considered as the variable input. Okay. So now, what do we mean, or what is the difference between short run production and long run production? Short run production, okay, is a shorter time frame, okay, in which there will be at least one of the input which is fixed and the other inputs can be varied. Okay, so it will have fixed input, okay, in the short run, because we assume, for example, okay, building. Okay, if you just started a business or if you just started a production, usually the number of building or the number of machineries will be fixed, meaning you don't have enough capital to increase the number of machineries or buildings. So in the short run, okay, in the short run, you will have both fixed input, okay, for example, the number of machineries or buildings will not change, it will remain the same. And in the short run, you will also have variable inputs, okay, such as labor, raw materials, electricity, water supply, and so on. Okay, what is the difference between short run and long run production? Long run period is a longer time frame in which all inputs are variable. Okay, so long run, all inputs are variable inputs. Okay, for example, you can increase the number of capital, okay, and then you can increase the number of labor. So both now becomes variable, including capital. Capital means machineries lah. Okay, machineries, capital goods ataupun capital inputs, ataupun buildings. So in the long run, you are able to increase the number of machineries that you have in your production, and you can also increase the number of buildings or premises that you need for your production. So that usually occurs in the long run. Okay. Okay, now let's look at the short run production first. So previously I have mentioned that in the short run, there will be at least one input that is fixed. Okay, so in this case, the fixed input is the capital. For example, machineries or buildings. So this is the production function for short run production. So you have a certain number of output that you can obtain with a certain number of inputs, which we have fixed input and we have variable input. Fixed input is capital lah. So capital is constant or fixed, okay, and the number of labor can change because it is variable input. So the more production you need, the more production you are going to make, the more labor you need in your production. Okay, so this is the production function for short run production. Okay. Alright, so in the short run production function, you are going to learn about the law of diminishing marginal return. So this is the concept that explains about the quantities of certain factors are increased while the quantities of one more factors are held constant. And beyond a certain level of production, the rate of increase in the output will decrease. Okay, so we are talking about the number of additional output. So you find the word marginal again here. So previous topic I have mentioned about the term marginal, which means additional ataupun extra. So in this case we are talking about return. Okay, return mean production lah. So this is actually talking about the additional production will eventually increase at a certain situation where the number of fixed input remain the same, but the number of variable input keeps increasing. So you can imagine a situation, for example, let's say you go to KFC. Okay, so KFC have a certain building, and the building is fixed. For example, the kitchen. So the kitchen area is fixed. The number of oven, the number of other equipments are the same, but the number of labor keeps increasing. So what will happen is the kitchen will be overcrowded. Okay, you have too much labor. For example, in the case of KFC, okay, you have too much workers in a fixed area of a kitchen. Okay, so the kitchen size is the same, fixed. Okay, that means the building lah. Okay, in this case the building. Okay, but the number of workers keep increasing. So what will happen is there will be overcrowded. Okay, overcrowding. Okay, so what will happen is this labor will no longer be productive. Okay, they will do the same, basically 2 or 3 people, 2 or 3 workers will do just the same job. Okay, so the production will no longer be productive. Production is no longer productive, ataupun the workers are no longer productive. Okay, too much workers in a certain area. Okay, so this is what we call as the law of diminishing marginal return. So this will cause the additional production to diminish. Okay, additional production will decline. Okay, because of these workers are no longer productive. Okay, so if you look at the second definition here, it is clearer to you. I guess it is clearer to you. Okay, it states that as more of variable input is used, which is the labor, okay, while other input and technology are fixed, which is the building or the equipment, the marginal product of a variable input will eventually decline. Okay, because the variable input will no longer be productive. Okay, so we are going to look at this diminishing marginal return later on when we do examples of calculation. Okay, so you can see clearer of what we mean by diminishing marginal return or diminishing marginal product. Okay. Okay, so we are going to do a certain calculation here. Okay, so in a short run production, you can calculate the total production with when a given amount of input is used along with the fixed input. So how much of output you can produce when you use a certain number of input. Let's say if you have 5 machineries or 5 equipments and you have 5 labors. Okay, so how much output you can produce with that certain number of input. And assuming, let's say, the number of machineries is the same because you are in the short run. So the number of machineries or equipment is still 5, and you add the number of labor from 5 to 10, for example. Okay, so what will happen to your output? Your output will increase. So you will be given the total production or the total product that you can get or that you can obtain when you use a certain number of input. Okay, and then you can calculate the average product here in a production. So the average product is actually looking at how much product, okay, what is the quantity of production or output that a certain labor can produce on average. Okay, so let's say if let's say I use a KFC as example. So if you have the number of machineries, okay, or equipments is the same, which is 5. So this is fixed. So the only thing that changed is the number of labor, okay, or workers. So let's say if you have one worker, how much pieces of chicken that you can produce? Let's say you can produce 100. Okay, and then if you add 2 labors, okay, another number of labor, maybe your production will increase from 100 to 200. And if you add more labors, you can increase more of your production, let's say 250 and so on. So from here, you are given the total product. This is the total product when you use a certain number of labor. Okay, and you can also calculate the average product, okay, which means how much production of pieces of chicken. Let's say this is production in terms of how much chicken can be produced. Okay, so you can calculate on average one labor can produce how many pieces of chicken. So in this case, you can calculate the average product. 100 divided by 1, you get 100. 200 divided by 2, you get 100. 250 divided by 3, the average is 83 pieces. Okay, so you can get the number of production, okay, or the number of pieces of chicken that a certain labor can produce in average. Okay, so that is average product. Okay, and then we have marginal product. Okay, so you find the word marginal again here. So we are going to look at how much additional production, okay, can be produced when you add another unit of variable input, for example labor. Okay, so let's say in this case you add one more labor. What is the additional number of or additional pieces of chicken that you can produce here? Is 100. So the marginal product here, okay, this one is 100, then 100, and then if you add another one unit of labor, okay, another number of labor, your production will increase by 50. So this is what we mean by marginal product, the additional production that you can get when you add more labor, okay, in the production. Okay. Okay, so now let's say you are given this schedule of data of a certain production. Okay, so what you are given here is the number of capital used in the production since we are in the short run. So the number of capital is fixed, okay, which is 10 unit. Okay, for example, 10 unit of machineries, okay, used in the production. And then we have different number of labor. We have 0, 1, 2 until 10 number of workers or labor in the production. And with that certain number of labor or a changing number of labor, the production will also change. So because you have different number of input here, you will have a different number of output. Okay, so the higher the variable input, you can see here, the higher the variable input, the higher the total production, and it will reach a maximum level. And from that certain level, your total product will start to decrease. So this is actually what we mean by the law of diminishing marginal return. So you can see here, the additional production or the marginal product first is increasing, and then at a certain level it will start to decrease, and then it will reach negative, meaning the variable input or the labor will no longer be productive because of overcrowding. If you see here, the number of capital is fixed. The number of machineries is fixed, but the number of labor keeps increasing and increasing. So this will lead to what we call as overcrowding effect. Okay, too much workers using the same number of machineries or fixed input. So these workers will no longer be productive. Okay, because they will be doing the same, basically the same job. Okay, so no productivity happens when you increase too much number of labor in the production. So that's why we get the law of diminishing marginal return here, as what you can see from the table. Okay, so this production we can actually divide into 3 different stages. Okay, so we are going to look at how we can divide the 3 stages of production here. Okay, next, okay, after this. So first one, before that, okay, I'm going to show you how you can get the figures in this schedule here. Okay, so this, okay, this capital input is fixed, which is 10 for every level of production. Okay, and then you have a different number of labor and a different number of production. Okay, and then marginal product, okay, as what we have looked at the formula before, how to calculate the marginal product is the change in the total production, you divide with the change in the labor, okay, the number of labor. So in this case, for the first one, you have when you increase from 0 labor, you increase to 1 labor, you will get additional 8 unit of production. So your marginal product is 8. And then when you add another more labor, 1 more labor, your additional production is 20 minus 8, that is 12. You add another unit of labor, you get additional production, which is 33 minus 20, so that is 13, and so on. So that is how you get, or that is how you calculate the marginal product. So your marginal product at the beginning, it will increase, and then it will start to decrease, okay, at a certain level of production. So when there is 4 number of labor, okay, the marginal product, from that point your marginal product will start to decline, okay, when you add more and more of labor until the maximum number, which is 8. So you can see here from 7, okay, when the producer add from 7 number of labor or worker to 8 number of worker, the production is not changing. So this is the point where or this is the point that shows that the production is no longer productive, because it does not generate additional production. So your marginal product will be 0. So that's why your marginal product is 0, because your production is not increasing anymore. And from that point, if you add more labor in your production, what will happen? Your production will start to decline. When your production decline, your marginal product will be negative lah. Okay, because let's say 54 minus 56, you will get negative 2. 50 minus 54, you will get negative 4. So that's why your marginal product becomes negative. So you can actually see from here, from the calculation of marginal product, you can actually see the different stages of production already. Okay, so average product, how to calculate average product is the production, the number of production, you divide with the number of labor, so you get the average production by each labor. Okay, so the first one is 8, meaning 1 labor can produce 8 product on average. And when you add 2 labors, now you have 2 labors, the average production by each labor is 10. And then you have 3 labor, the average production for each labor is 11. So this is where you get the maximum average product, and from that point your average product will start to decline because of overcrowding effect tadi. Okay, so how do we divide the 3 stages of production? Okay, the first stage here, okay, will start from zero production. Let me delete this first, clear this one. Okay, so the first stage is from zero labor until the number of labor that will no longer generate additional marginal product. Okay, meaning your marginal product will no longer increase. So from here, okay, from here to here, you can see your marginal product starts to decline. So that shows stage 1. Okay, or you can also look at the average product, where your average product has reached maximum, which is 11. So that is the end of stage 1 of your production. And then stage 2 will start when your marginal product starts to decrease, which is from 5 number of labor until 8 number of labor, from here to here. Okay, and you can see your average product from here to here will start to decline. So that is stage 2. Stage 2 will end when your marginal product equals to 0. Okay, and then stage 3, that is where your marginal product starts to be negative, which is from 9 labor to 10 labor. So your marginal product will be negative. That is stage 3 of your production. So later on, we are going to look at what are the differences between stage 1, stage 2 and stage 3, or what happens at stage 1, stage 2 and stage 3. And you are going to also look at which stage of production will the producer choose to produce. Okay, meaning how much number of labor does the producer need to produce ataupun to have a productive production. Okay, productive level of production. Okay, so if you illustrate the data from the previous schedule or table on a graph or using a graph, this is what you will get. Okay, so you have the top one here is actually the total production, okay, which is mentioned here, okay, total production. And then the purple one here is your average production, average product. And the green one is the curve for marginal product. Okay, so this is what you get after you have plotted all the data from the previous table. Okay, from here. Alright, so you can actually divide the stages. Okay, so how do you divide the stages? Okay, so the first stage, okay, the first stage here is when the total production is still increasing at increasing rate, as what you can see here. Okay, the total production is increasing at increasing rate, meaning the curve will be very steep. Okay, it increases at a fast pace. Okay, the pace is very fast here. So at this point, your marginal product will increase. Okay, the green one here. Okay, because the additional production that you get when you add more labor will increase. That's why marginal product is increasing. Okay, and then your average product will also increase, the purple one here. Okay, and how do you know where to stop? For stage 1 is when average product, okay, average product intersect with marginal product. Okay, so you can see here, okay, this is the point where average product intersect with marginal product, or average product is at maximum. So the purple curve here, which is the average product curve, is at maximum. So two conditions, okay, to end stage 1. Okay, stage 1 ends when average product is at maximum, or average product equals to marginal product. It means the curve will intersect. Okay, the average product curve and the marginal product curve will intersect. So that is the end of stage 1. Okay, stage 2. Okay, now we are going to look at what happens at stage 2. Okay, stage 2 is where your total product will increase at a decreasing rate. So you can see the curve is a bit flatter as compared to stage 1 here. Okay, so the curve here is flat. Okay, dia mendatar sikit. Okay, so that is where total production increase at a decreasing rate. Okay, so that's why when your additional production increase at a decreasing rate, your marginal product will decrease. So you can see the green line here, the green curve here is decreasing. That shows the marginal product decrease. Okay, because your total production is no longer increasing too much. Okay, so you can see the total product curve here is a bit flatter. Okay, and then your average product is also decreasing. Okay, and then stage 3, okay, where does stage 2 ends? Okay, stage 2 will end when the marginal production equals to 0. Okay, so this is the condition here. Marginal production equals to 0. So that is where your stage 2 ends. Or you can also look at the total production. Okay, the curve for total production is at maximum. So two conditions that you can look at to know whether stage 2 has ended or not is when total production is at maximum or when marginal production equals to 0. That means stage 2 of your production is ending. Okay, and from that point, stage 3 will start. Okay, so at stage 3, the total production will start to decline. From here to here, it starts to decline, and your marginal production becomes negative at this point. Okay, it is now at a negative axis. Okay, so that is what we mean by stage 3. Okay, your production will no longer generate additional production. Okay, adding more labor will no longer be productive. Okay, for your production. So that is what happens at the 3 stages of the production. So you can see here the relationship between average product and marginal product. So if you just focus on the two curves in your production, which is average product here and your marginal product. So you can see when marginal product is above average product, which is at stage 1 here, your green curve is above your purple curve here, MP is above AP, your average product is increasing. So the purple curve here is increasing. When marginal product is below average product, which is at the second stage here, your green curve here is below your purple curve. So what happens to your average product? Your average product is decreasing. And when marginal product equals to average product, here your total production is, your average production here is at maximum, meaning your purple curve here has reached its peak. Okay, dia punya peak kat sini, puncak dia. Okay, your average product is at maximum. Okay, so if we go into detail for each stages, okay, so we are going to explain what actually happens at each stage of production. So we have here stage 1. Okay, it says here that stage 1, okay, the proportion of fixed factors are greater than variable factors. Okay, so let's look at where stage 1 starts first. Okay, stage 1 dia akan start bila the number of labor, okay, labor equals to 0. Okay, that is dia punya starting point. And when average product equals to marginal product, that is where your stage 1 will end. Okay, alright, so what happens at stage 1 is fixed factors are greater than variable factors, meaning the number of capital in the production, for example machineries or building, is greater than the number of labor, meaning there is not enough labor to suffice the space or the equipments available in the production. Okay, so this is what we mean by underutilizing the fixed input. Okay, meaning the labor is not enough to utilize all the available fixed input or capital in the production, underutilizing the the fixed input. So this is an example of waste of resources lah. Okay, waste of resources. So producers will not choose to produce at this stage. Okay, meaning they will not choose this number of labor. Okay, alright. And then stage 2. Okay, so stage 2, it actually starts when average product equals to marginal product. Okay, and then it will end when total product reach maximum, or marginal product starts to be 0, meaning there will be no additional production, okay, that will be obtained from adding more unit of labor. So this is where the stage 2 ends. Okay, so what happens at stage 2? This is where the number of capital ataupun fixed input is equivalent to the number of labor. So it is considered as just nice for the production. So capital, the number of capital is just enough with the number of labor in the production. So this is an efficient production. Okay, so there is no underutilization or there is no overcrowding. Okay, just nice lah. The number of capital and the number of labor is just nice for the production. So usually producers will choose to produce at stage 2. Okay, and what happens at stage 3? Okay, stage 3 actually starts when total production starts to decline. When total production starts to decline, that is where stage 1 start. Okay, and then it will end at a certain level when the number of labor is no longer needed, okay, in the production. Okay, so what happens at stage 3 is the number of labor is too much, okay, as compared to the number of fixed input, meaning you have too many labor, but the number of capital, the number of machinery or building is the same. So that will lead to overcrowding. Okay, so overcrowding is inefficient. Okay, it will cause unproductivity. Okay, the labor will no longer be productive. So this is not a good stage of production. Okay, and producers should not produce at this stage. Okay, so the producer will usually choose stage 2, okay, for their production. So stage 2, if you look at here, if you look at this schedule, stage 2 is from 5 labor to 8 labors. So the producers have the option of hiring range of 5 to 8 labors only, not less, not more. Okay, so that the producer can achieve stage 2, okay, in the production, which is efficient level of production. Okay,